The moment my dad's fist connected with my face, everything went silent, like the world itself decided it didn't want to witness what was happening, and all I could taste was blood and humiliation while 68 people I knew, loved or barely recognized, stared straight at me. And that's when his hand tangled in my hair and he dragged me toward the door, like I was nothing, more than trash ruining his perfect day. And the question I still can't stop asking myself is this. After what I did next, was I wrong? Or would you have done the same thing if you were me? I'm still shaking when I think about it. Not because of the pain, but because that moment was the breaking point of a lifetime of swallowing things I was never supposed to swallow. But to understand how it got that far, I have to rewind, because that punch didn't come out of nowhere, even if it shocked everyone watching. Growing up, my dad was the kind of man people praised in public and feared in private. To neighbors and extended family, he was strict but respectable, old school, a man's man who believed discipline built character. Inside our house, that discipline meant walking on eggshells, measuring every word, every movement, because the smallest thing could set him off. My older brother Adam was his pride. Firstborn, athletic, loud in the way my dad approved of. I was the opposite. Quieter, more sensitive, the kid who read books and avoided conflict. From as early as I can remember, I learned that love in our house was conditional, and I almost never met the conditions. By the time Adam announced he was getting married, I was already low contact with my dad. I'd moved out years earlier, built my own life, my own routines, my own peace. But family has a way of pulling you back in, especially when everyone around you keeps saying things like, "It's your brother's big day," and just, "Keep the peace for one afternoon." So, I agreed to attend the wedding. Telling myself I could survive a few hours, I practiced smiles in the mirror, rehearsed neutral responses, promised myself I wouldn't rise to any bait. I even bought a gift that was probably more expensive than I could afford, because part of me still wanted approval, even though I hated that about myself. The wedding itself was held in this elegant rented hall, all white drapes and soft lighting, the kind of place that smells like flowers and money. 68 guests, I later found out, not including staff. I arrived early, hoping to blend in. Adam looked genuinely happy, and despite everything, I was glad for him. His bride was kind to me, warm in a way that made my chest ache. For a while, I thought maybe I'd been wrong to dread it so much. My dad barely acknowledged me at first, just a tight nod, and I took that as a win. Things started going wrong during the reception. Alcohol has always been a dangerous ingredient when my dad is involved, and I could see the familiar signs as the night went on. His voice got louder, his laugh sharper, his opinions more aggressively shared. At some point, he cornered me near the bar and started criticizing my life choices. The same old script about how I could have been more if I'd just listened to him, how Adam was the successful one, how I was still finding myself like that was some kind of insult. I kept my answers short. I tried to walk away. That's when he grabbed my arm and told me not to disrespect him by turning my back. I remember feeling that old hot fear crawl up my spine, mixed with something new and dangerous, anger. We were surrounded by people, my brother's co-workers, our relatives, friends from childhood. I whispered for him to let go, told him this wasn't the place. He leaned in close enough that I could smell the alcohol on his breath and hissed that I was embarrassing him. The irony almost made me laugh. Almost. I managed to pull my arm free and said, quietly, that I wasn't doing this tonight. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Later, during the speeches, when everyone was seated and attention was on Adam and his bride, my dad stood up unexpectedly. He was supposed to give a toast, but instead of talking about love or family, he started making jokes at my expense. Veiled at first, then more obvious. Comments about how not all sons turn out right, how some people waste potential. I could feel eyes shifting toward me, the uncomfortable murmurs. My face burned. I wanted to disappear. I looked at Adam, hoping he'd step in, but he just looked stunned, frozen. Something in me snapped when my dad said my name directly and laughed. I stood up. I didn't shout. I didn't swear. I just said, "This is supposed to be my brother's day. Please stop." That was it. That was all. And that's when my dad walked over, his face red, his jaw tight, and before I could even process what was happening, he slapped me across the face so hard my head snapped to the side. Gasps filled the room. Someone screamed. I tasted blood. Then his hand was in my hair. fingers digging into my scalp. And he started dragging me toward the exit, yelling about disrespect, about teaching me a lesson. 68 guests, 68 witnesses. I could see phones out, faces pale with shock. I was dimly aware of my brother shouting, of someone trying to intervene, but my dad was strong, and I was in survival mode. He threw me out the front doors like I was nothing, and they slammed shut behind me, cutting off the noise, the music, the life of the party. I stumbled, barely staying on my feet. My face throbbed, my scalp burned, and for a few seconds, I just stood there in the cold air, shaking, humiliated, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. This was the moment I'd been afraid of my entire life. The moment where everything ugly that had always been hidden came out in front of everyone. Here's where I want you to pause for a second, because this is the part where I had to make a choice that still divides people when they hear about it. So that's the situation I was in. Bleeding, shaken, publicly assaulted by my own father at my brother's wedding. Before I tell you what I did next, I want you to stop and think, and honestly ask yourself what you would have done in my shoes. Because up until this point, I'd spent my whole life staying quiet. What I did next surprised even me. Instead of running, instead of calling a friend or hiding in my car, I walked back in. I didn't go through the front doors. I went around to the side entrance that staff used. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely open the door, but something was pushing me forward, something that felt like self-respect finally waking up. When I stepped back into the hall, the room went silent again. My dad was still near the front, chest heaving, looking like he'd just won something. I raised my voice then, not screaming, but loud enough that everyone could hear. I said that what had just happened wasn't discipline. It wasn't culture, it was abuse, and that I was done pretending otherwise. I told them this wasn't the first time. Just the first time there were witnesses. I saw my dad's face shift from anger to something like panic. People started murmuring. Someone handed me a napkin for my bleeding lip. I looked at Adam and told him I loved him, that none of this was his fault, and that I was sorry his day had been overshadowed. Then I turned back to my dad and said I was done having a relationship with him, out loud, in front of everyone. Security was called. Not on me, on him. He was escorted out, still shouting, still insisting he'd done nothing wrong. I left shortly after, my brother hugging me tightly, whispering apologies through tears. The aftermath was messy. Family members took sides. Some told me I should have just left, that I embarrassed everyone by coming back in. Others thanked me quietly, admitting they'd seen his behavior before but never knew how bad it was. My phone blew up for days. In the weeks that followed, I filed a police report. I started therapy. I blocked my dad's number. It wasn't easy and it wasn't clean, but for the first time I felt like I'd chosen myself. The image of being dragged by my hair in front of 68 guests still haunts me, but it also reminds me of the moment I stopped letting fear run my life. So now I'm asking you, after hearing the whole story, do you think I was wrong for going back in and calling him out? Or was it long overdue? If you were on my side, like this video, because it helps more than you know, subscribe if you want to hear more real, raw stories like this, and share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments, because I read every single one. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you all in the next story.